This morning we commemorate Earth Day, an annual event meant to raise awareness of our natural environment, its extraordinary creativity, and our role in protecting and restoring it. I would also like to give special thanks right now to Ellen Morgan, Carol Ann, Zoe Southcott, and Julia Marshall for allowing me to use some of their photos. Spring has returned, and with it the promise of hope and rebirth. A spectacular phenomenon is currently underway, although it is often overlooked and underappreciated for the true wonder that it is. Frogs and toads have re-emerged, their ringing songs, a sure sign that winter at long last is over. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of a spring peeper, the smallest of the 8 frog species found in Waterloo region. At first, only a few tentative calls are heard in early April as the water warms up in roadside ditches and shallow woodland ponds. As the air temperature climbs, so does the number of frogs, each of them emitting a sharp beep, repeated for hours at a time. The frogs are tiny, no bigger than a human thumbnail. Yet each one sings at a sonic level measuring 100 decibels. Standing amidst a peeper chorus is like attending an amphibian rock concert, your head left ringing from the piercing sound pressure. Let's have a listen. Frogs, and we'll see, sometimes our technology doesn't want to. So if you advance that one. Frogs, toads, next one. Thomas, you could advance that. Toads, which are a type of frog, and salamanders. You could advance, like this red-spotted newt, are amphibians. This Latin word means double life, a reference to the 2 stages in an amphibian's life cycle. One stage being aquatic and the other stage terrestrial. Amphibians evolved from fish 300 million years ago and were the first vertebrates, animals with backbones, to spend at least part of their lives out of the water. There are about 7,000 species found worldwide in a variety of habitats on every continent except Antarctica. Being so widespread, it is not surprising that frogs feature prominently in the legends, folklore, and religions of most human cultures. Their place is not without controversy. Humans have had and continue to have ambivalent feelings about their web-footed neighbors. Amphibians have been celebrated as representatives of the divine, and they have been maligned as diabolical creatures linked to witchcraft. And this is from an 1874 edition of the Grimm's Fairy Tales, and it's part of the Frog Prince story. There are 2 specific references to frogs in the Bible, neither of them particularly flattering. In the Exodus story, frogs were the second plague sent to terrorize and demoralize the Egyptians. When animals, even those that might be admired or even venerated, popped up in swarms and in places where they were not expected, in bedrooms, kitchens, even in the food, the response must surely have been one of panic and fright. No house was spared a visit from the hoppy horde. After creating widespread havoc, the army of frogs died within a day, the corpses piled high in smelly, rotting heaps. Subsequent plagues variously featured lice, flies, and locusts, putting frogs squarely in a league with a cast of decidedly unsavory characters, members of an all-star plague team, if you will. Frogs took an even bigger hit, image-wise, in New Testament times, when John described them in Revelation as evil spirits coming out of the mouth of devils. Egyptians regarded frogs as sacred animals. They were symbols of transformation based on their transition from aquatic, water-breathing tadpoles to terrestrial air-breathing adults. They were symbols of resurrection because of their ability to survive underground burial before being reborn by the Nile floods, and of fertility because of the masses of eggs they laid after mating. Frogs were held in such high esteem that the Egyptian goddess Hecate was depicted as a woman with the head of a frog. The choice of frogs to launch a plague was thus an act of defiance by the Israelites, designed to show that their God was superior to the idolatrous animal gods of Egypt. The antipathy of the biblical accounts towards frogs may have contributed to the fear and persecution that followed amphibians in the Western world. Many early Christian images portrayed frogs as representing sin and heresy. An iconic medieval image of Mary shows her sitting on a throne, holding the baby Jesus, with one of Mary's feet planted firmly on the back of a frog. The symbolism was clear and potent. In the late medieval and early modern eras, frogs, and especially toads, were said to be the constant companion of witches and sorcerers, sinister creatures in cahoots with the dark arts. Key ingredients in a bubbling witch's brew, recall double, double toil and trouble in Macbeth, were body parts of toad, salamander, and frog. The superstitions that developed around amphibians' purported powers were not entirely groundless. All amphibians have toxic skin secretions designed to repel predators. The toxicity of the secretions varies among species. In the case of most of Ontario's frogs and salamanders, they are relatively mild, but could make a person sick if ingested. Secretions from frogs elsewhere in the world can lead to wild hallucinations or even death. The golden poison frog of South America is one of the most toxic animals on the planet, each tiny individual holding enough poison within its skin to kill 10 adult humans. Modern research is working to dispel the half-truths and prejudices that have formed around amphibians. Studies are demonstrating just how critical these animals are to ecosystem function and sustainability. Salamanders, like this yellow-spotted salamander, unlike their frog and toad cousins, do not sing, and thus are an inconspicuous, secretive presence in the natural order. But their ecological impact is huge. They are astonishingly abundant in hardwood forests, far outnumbering and outweighing the birds and mammals that live alongside them. Salamanders feast on soil invertebrates and therefore play a vital role in the flow of energy through their surroundings. A similar situation exists in wetlands, where frogs have a decided numerical and collective weight advantage over the birds and mammals living there. We humans have often thought of cold-blooded animals as being of a lower, more primitive order compared to us and other warm-blooded beings. But the fact that cold-blooded creatures are sometimes much more prominent than birds and mammals demonstrates how successful and adaptive these supposedly inferior animals can be. The natural history of amphibians often veers into what seems to be improbable science fiction. Consider the life cycle of a frog. In the juvenile stage, they live underwater as legless vegetarians, having a small mouth and equipped with gills and a tail. They then transform into tailless carnivorous adults, having a large mouth, 4 legs, the ability to breathe air, and a wandering spirit that may take them far from water. Or marvel at how they survive the winter. Waterloo amphibians like the wood frog Spring peeper, chorus frog, and tree frog produce a type of antifreeze in their body that encases and protects their vital organs. They overwinter on land under leaf litter, their bodies frozen as solid as a popsicle. In this state, they do not breathe, do not have a heartbeat, and appear to be dead. But then, as if by miracle, they revive in the spring, a remarkable annual enactment of resurrection. Other frogs in our region have different but equally compelling overwintering strategies. Green frogs and leopard frogs spend the winter underwater, buried in mud where they are safe from freezing. But how do they breathe? Entombed under ice in a watery environment for up to half the year. Amazingly enough, through their skin, which is able to absorb oxygen dissolved in the water. Alas, all is not well in the amphibian world. A 2023 article in the journal Nature reported that 40% of amphibian species worldwide are at risk of extinction, making them the most threatened group of vertebrates on Earth. Their rate of extinction is far higher than it is for birds or mammals. Since 1970, 200 frog species worldwide have winked out forever. In Ontario, over half of the province's 47 amphibian and reptile species are now listed as being at risk under federal legislation. Road mortality takes a terrible toll on these animals, along with poaching, global warming, and diseases associated with the exotic pet trade. But the single largest threat, according to the just-released Ontario Reptile and Amphibian Atlas, is the destruction, degradation, and fragmentation of habitat. The threat is most severe in southern Ontario, where the highest concentration of amphibian and reptile species overlaps directly with the highest human densities. In the competition for living space, humans almost always win out over Mother Nature and her crew. One example, the proposed Highway 413, if it becomes a reality, will cut through and decimate at least 220 wetlands and dozens of waterways. If only frogs and salamanders could vote. Amphibians are so unlike humans in lifestyle, appearance, and design that most of us have mixed feelings when it comes to appreciating them. They lack the glamour of an owl or a lynx, and too often are ignored and underrepresented in conservation efforts. Hopefully, their popular image will improve as we learn more about their intriguing life histories and realize how crucial they are to ecological food webs, functioning both as predator and prey. We often forget, when we ramble through nature, just how wild and unforgiving it can be. We take photos, make sound recordings, meditate, soak up the ambient forest atmosphere, but are often blissfully unaware of the intense struggle for survival that goes on all around us. The life expectancy of many frogs is about 4 months, with 95% of the population failing to survive their first winter. They have many predators. We witnessed this firsthand as we watched the garter snake capture and swallow an adult American toad. It was one of the most remarkable and emotional wildlife encounters we've ever had. Toads have several defense mechanisms to protect them from being eaten. They puff themselves up, like this one has done, up to double their normal size, and their toxic skin usually makes them unpalatable. Unfortunately for toads, its inflated size and toxic skin do not deter snakes. Have a look at this. Here's a garter snake that is latched onto the back leg of the toad. The toad has puffed itself up. Now, the snake has embedded its teeth into the back of the toad, and it starts to engulf it further and further. You can see the little white liquid here. These are the toxins that the toad is excreting, trying to get the snake to release it, but no go. It took about 7 minutes from the time the snake latched onto the leg of the toad until the toad finally disappeared into the snake's mouth. We may be horrified by things like this, but the natural world pursues its own purpose, indifferent to whatever we may think. The toad's life ends, but the snake's life goes on. And so does the life of other toads and frogs, who seek no more from us than merely the right to survive and reproduce. The pulsing music of frogs is an iconic wonder, as much a part of the wilderness as the cry of a loon. Their songs are also a mesmerizing part of our own regional soundscape, a yearly reminder that the magic of wildness can still be found right around us. Humans have often considered amphibians to be among the lowest of the low in the animal hierarchy. The true measure of our success in safeguarding biodiversity long into the future may ultimately rest not on our attitudes to the large charismatic species like caribou and wolves, but to the lowlier ones, the numerous and ecologically important small animals. Jesus' words in Matthew have universal application. Truly I tell you, he said, whatever you did for one of the least of these, you did for me. So in conclusion, let's listen to Waterloo's frog and toad choirs. Only male frogs sing, and like birds, they do so to proclaim territory and attract mates. Female frogs are attracted to the loudest and most rapid calls. All of the recordings were made by Carol in Waterloo Region, with the exception of the bullfrog chorus, which she made in Algonquin Park. We'll play them in the order you would hear them over the spring season as the various species emerge from hibernation and begin to sing. The first one, wood frog. Spring peeper. Chorus frog. American toad with a cardinal singing. Tree frog, which can change color from gray to green. Very bird-like. Green frog. And finally, bullfrog. On behalf of the frogs, thank you.